Hello again, everyone. Welcome to 2025 and the 179th edition of Cotton Grower Magazine's Cotton Companion Podcast. I'm Jim Stedman, editor of Cotton Grower, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and colleague, Beck Barnes. So Beck, when we started this podcast back in 2016, neither one of us knew what we were doing or what we were getting into. We just knew we wanted to try to stay in touch with our cotton grower audience in a new and different way, knowing that they spend more time in their truck or tractor cab than they do sitting behind a desk. So knowing that, and how do you feel about it now as we're all the way up to episode 179?
Yeah, well, we've kind of settled in. We got our routine now, don't we? I think about those early days, Jim, and we had brand new microphones, and man, we had a soundboard that might as well have been written in Russian. Neither one of us knew what we were doing with that thing, but we ran out and got headphones, microphone, soundboard. We put egg crate, that foam egg crate stuff on the wall to help with audio. And, boy, now here we are 9 years later, and we we don't have any of that, equipment or fanfare. Yeah, we just kinda do this via Zoom call these days, and, I think the end result is just good, just as well, but, Jim, the main thing I think about is the audience that we have cultivated, and who have joined us over the years. In the grand scheme, it's such a small niche podcast for people who grow cotton in this country, which, we know and y'all know there's not very many of us. But well, hundreds of y'all tune in and join us each episode, and we are so appreciative of that. And that number has kind of slowly and steadily risen over the years. And boy, we're just thankful for that. And yeah, that's the main thing I think about when I'm reflective. When I've been, this early January season of reflection. Yeah, just gratitude for me.
Well, yeah, definitely. Because again, we had absolutely no clue how this was going to work. If it was going to work at all. Some people may say it's still not working. I don't know, but
Does it work? Yeah.
yeah, it works. It works. But anyway, we've got quite a bit to talk about in this episode, including the results of Cotton Growers' annual cotton acreage survey. And obviously, we want to talk about the fact that U.S. agriculture was kind of caught up in the debates in Washington over continuing resolution to keep the government funded back in mid-December. And the question from Ag's perspective, were the proposed disaster and economic relief packages going to survive that back and forth discussion? And thankfully they did. And so we're going to visit with our friend Dr. Darren Hudson at Texas Tech University here in just a few minutes to talk about that entire process, what it means for cotton, and what growers need to do to take advantage of those programs.
As always, things turned in our favor about 45 seconds after we hit the publish button on a podcast that said things were not going in our favor, as I recall. So
That's true.
a big year welcome to the cotton industry for us putting the famous Cotton Companion jinx on current events. But yeah, it was a roller coaster. So we're happy to have Darren with us to kind of sort things out. But first, we want to welcome Bayer and its Delta Pine seed brand to the podcast as a new sponsor for 2025. Our colleague and custom content manager, Hillary Wynn, recently visited with my buddy, Eric Best, Delta Pine cotton product manager, and we'd like to share that conversation with you right now.
Hi, this is Hillary Wynn, Custom Content Manager with Maestro Media Worldwide, publisher of Cotton Grower Magazine. My guest today is Eric Best, Delta Pine Cotton Product Manager at Bayer Crop Science. Eric, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hillary.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with Delta Pine?
Absolutely. I've been involved with Paymaster and Delta Pine through all the iterations of buyouts and brands over the years since 1996. So going into my 29th year of working in the commercial cotton business.
So you've just been around this industry for just a little while.
Still trying to figure the crop out. Based in Lubbock, Texas, where there's a lot of acres, so there's a lot still to figure out.
I can imagine. So the Delta Pine class of 25 cottonseed varieties were recently unveiled. Can you tell us about this year's class?
Absolutely. This was a tough class. We had a lot of options out there, both in the BoldGuard 3 XtendFlex trait platform as well as the BoldGuard 3 XtendFlex trait platform with the Thrive On technology. So we asked growers across the belt, depending on the region, to look at 8 or 9 different products. Some had 3 or 4 for their area, some had 4 or 5 for their area, just depending on where they were. And at the end of the day, the growers came back and they voted and they shared their performance and yield data with us. And the class of 25 is proud to launch 4 new Delta Pine products.
Well, that's exciting. Can you tell us how this year's varieties were chosen?
This program's in its 17th year, and one of the things that has made it successful, my predecessor in this role said, "Hey, we get a lot of small plot data from breeders, from academics, from external sources, and from our internal folks as well." But his inception at the inception of the program, his thought was, what if we took some of these products that have a high likelihood of being commercialized, grow a little bit more seed of them, and how about we put them out there with growers in the real world and let them grow larger plots? And when I say that, I mean that some of these guys might have 4 or 5 varieties, might have 10, 12, 15 acres of each variety. Gives them the opportunity to grow them separately, manage them separately, harvest and gin them separately, and provide feedback for us in their real world situations. At the end of the day, we ask them, what do you like? What do you not like? And if these were commercialized, would you vote to purchase those in the future? And ultimately, the growers have spoken. It's based on that real world information. And they told us these were the 4 across the different regions that they felt we needed to bring into the class of 25. And that's what we did.
You mentioned that this program has been around for 17 years. Why has this new product evaluator program been so successful for so long?
I think it's very simple. When you involve the growers and producers across the belt in the decision making process, the probability of them being profitable added to the mix, that insight is invaluable. And when they have some skin in the game and they tell you what they like and don't like, and you listen, there's no other outcome really than for it to be successful. When you seek that input, they're going to tell you what they like and don't like. And ultimately, that's the real world. That's where these things are going to perform. And it's been highly successful based on that protocol and that feedback from those producers.
Now, where can growers go to learn more about Delta Pine and the class of 25?
So, depending on the region they are in, of course, we have the website, but probably the more local information would come from their individual sales and technical reps. So, each of these regions has what we call an FSR and a local squad, a field sales rep, as well as their agronomists and/or their tech development reps would have far more specific details about the intricacies of some of these products and the likelihood of making them successful within those regions. So, reach out to your local Delta Pine rep or your local Delta Pine retailer to learn a little bit more about the class of 25.
Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, and hope y'all have a wonderful and prosperous 2025.
Okay, a big thanks to Hillary and to Eric the Best for that segment, and to Bayer and to Delta Pine for their support of the Cotton Companion podcast.
We're going to talk about our best guess cotton acreage number here in just a couple of minutes. But first, we got word. There's word today from the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol about enrollment in the trust protocol and application for the Climate Smart Cotton Program for the 2025 crop year.
Yeah, the trust protocol provides growers with data and resources to choose practices that are best for their land and business. They can use this information to help make informed decisions, optimize practices, and demonstrate progress toward a more sustainable future. Now, the Climate Smart Cotton Program offers additional financial support for enrolled growers over 3 different levels of involvement: the Trust Protocol membership, implementing a climate smart practice change, and a carbon inset payment. More details on those 3 levels can be found on cottongrower.com or at trustuscotton.org. Now, enrollment is open through the end of April. Grower enrollment specialists are available to provide regional specific support, answer questions, help you learn more about how these programs can benefit your operation, and help begin the enrollment process. Now, let's talk a bit about projected cotton acreage for 2025. Now, the January issue of Cotton Grower, Jim, features the results of our annual acreage survey. It's a survey that a lot of folks from many different quarters of the industry pay attention to quietly. And it's also available now at cottongrower.com, the results of that survey. So what did it tell us this year, Jim?
Well, it was. I think it's safe to say that this was one of the more complicated numbers to come up with this year. Basically, because 2024, as you know, and everybody listening knows, was a tough and sometimes catastrophic production year for many growers. Cotton prices and input prices were still on the opposite ends of the spectrum. We still were without a favorable safety net and a new farm bill. Financing for some growers this year may still be difficult. There's still the jury's still out on that situation. And whenever we were putting this number together in early December's harvest was still wrapping up in some areas. So there were still some questions yet to be answered as far as the 2024 crop. But before I get to the number, Beck, we always have to do the disclaimer. For people who think that this is a scientific survey, this is anything but a scientific survey.
Well, I'm scientifically sound, but
Well, our numbers are based on input and conversations with multiple stakeholders in the cotton industry, and those would be like our readers, state cotton specialists, economists, and other folks related to U.S. cotton. We've described it before, and we will continue to describe it as it's nothing more than a reporting job with math involved, and we try to do the best we can with the information we get. So, that said, and based on the information we had in early December, we've projected U.S. cotton growers will plant a total, and this is upland and payment together, a total of 11.04 million acres in 2025. That's down roughly 5.4% from USDA's final reported planting rate numbers of 11.7 million acres for 2024. Now, in a lot of cases, state acreages are kind of projected to remain relatively flat from 2024 for a number of reasons. There's not a lot of alternative crops. There's infrastructure issues that they have to keep taking care of, like gins and things like that. And also because there are other commodity products out there that they could grow. The prices are not that attractive on those either. Um, but again, like I said, a lot of these states are probably going to remain relatively flat. In others, they're anticipating declines of maybe 10 to 20%. The one thing we were kind of watching out for a little bit in California, there's a new statewide groundwater sustainability program that is finally taking effect. From what I understand, it was something that passed several years ago, but is now just finally kind of coming to life, and that may have the potential to significantly reduce cotton acres in California. But anyway, that with that number, if you want to look at it on a regional breakout, in uh, the southeastern states, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia, uh, we're projecting 2.2 million acres of cotton. In the Mid-South, probably about 1.97 million acres. In the Southwest, and that would be Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, with Texas making up the majority of that number, uh, 6.6 million acres. And out in the West, where water is still going to be a big issue, and there's always politics involved, based on what we were able to find out in early December, we're projecting about 256,000 total cotton acres across those three states. So that's kind of where we are at this point. If our listeners are interested in the state projections, those are listed online at cottongrower.com. And it's been interesting. Beck, I could not recall when Cotton Grower started doing this survey. Uh,
oh
because
gosh.
I think it's something that we've just kind of inherited over the years. And you said, yes, there are people that actually do pay attention to this, because I start getting calls the day that this actually posted on our website. And someone remarked to me, said, I think they recalled the first acreage survey from Cotton Grower being done in 1998.
Okay, that I could believe that. It was going on when I showed up in '08. Yeah, I mean, it's a bold thing to try to undertake, and to do it, you need contacts across the belt, trustworthy, knowledgeable contacts across the belt. I mean, that's who should get the credit for this thing is the growers who respond to it, but we lean on extension cotton specialists
Right.
and other extension folks and just kind of other key stakeholders who have a good grasp of what's going on state to state. That's how we build it, is state by state. Um, and yeah, we've been I would say a good adjective is suspiciously close to true, close to accurate with our projection for many, many years. And that is why, yeah, we start getting calls from commodity brokers and other folks who have a vested personal interest in what this number might say.
Exactly.
But as soon as the second, really before it comes out, yeah, I start getting emails. Hey, y'all got a number yet? Uh, I know I tell everybody no until that January issue starts hitting mailboxes because, hey, our readership comes first, right, Jim?
That's right. Absolutely. We control the number. Nobody else. But yeah, it's interesting. And one of the things too that I think makes this number made it particularly complicated is coming off of two years of, and maybe 3 years, depending on where you are in the cotton belt, of lower than anticipated yields and high expenses and low prices. There's a lot of emotion tied up in it right now, in terms of growers' attitudes toward what are they going to do next year? Are they going to plant another crop? Uh, are they going to be able to plant another crop? What are prices doing? What's happening in Washington? There's so many things swirling around that you kind of had to separate some of that emotion from, what the actual number was going to be, and it was an interesting process this time. So
Yeah,
uh,
and I mean that can go both ways. I know from my years doing
yes,
you talk to a you talk to one of y'all farmers after a tough year, and it's I'm never touching this stuff again. Yeah. Emotionally responding, and then of course he might reduce his number by 10% the following year. And we know that it comes down to what pencils out the best.
right, absolutely, and so we'll see. It's an interesting exercise to do. We've always said that, somebody's gotta step out first, and we're always willing to stick our necks out, sort of be the bell cow on this, if you will. The Cotton Council right now is getting their survey, results in, so they'll be talking about their number at their annual meeting in mid-February. USDA probably has, 3 or 4 different dates that they're looking at uh, to uh, to release their initial estimate. But that could come up probably toward the end of this month, or generally comes up uh, maybe late February. So we'll see. We'll see how our number stacks up once the scientific folks get their number squared away. I think we'll be close. I really do.
I suspect we will.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, things in Washington, D.C. got a bit stressful in mid to late December regarding government funding and for some other programs that have specific benefits for U.S. agriculture, including cotton. Now, a lot of folks were watching that up and down and back and forth debate closely, including our friend Dr. Darren Hudson. He's the Combest Endowed Chair and Director of the International Center for Agricultural Competitiveness at Texas Tech University. Darren, welcome back to the podcast. Have you had a chance to recover some of that pre-holiday whiplash? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose. The challenge is always what's the next whiplash, and so you might recover from one, and then you're looking for the next shoe to drop, so to speak. So yeah, we're on a bit of, I guess, relief at this moment, and waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not even sure where we start this discussion, just because there are so many proposals and options for, disaster aid and economic aid for farmers were discussed and dismissed and then reanimated and debated. It really didn't seem like we were making any progress until, of course, you come up to the deadline.
Mhm.
Uh, but I knew it was getting serious when I started getting official statements from the National Cotton Council on Saturday afternoon.
Right. Yeah. It was a bit. It would, and I guess you would call it perplexing. I don't think there was a lot in that funding discussion. I don't think there was a lot of resistance to the farm bill. I think, well, I should say, at least initially, Vivek comes out and he points to the farm bill as why is this in the, in the continuation? This is a waste of money, et cetera, et cetera. And, and I don't know whether he got contacted. I know a number of people, including myself on Twitter, were like, wait a minute. No, this is not. I mean, you at least need to be transparent. The farm bill has to be in there because if we don't, it's an absolute disaster come January 1. Now, whether or not the economic disaster assistance kind of thing, that was new money. The rest of it was in the baseline, so there was really nothing new there. And anyway, I don't know whether he got the message via other vehicles or what, but he backed away from that. And so then in the subsequent discussions, it was more about all of the other add-ons, right?
Mhm.
Now the disaster assistance, like you said, was sort of in and out and in and out, and I think there was a well coordinated effort on the part of the Farm Bureau, National Cotton Council, the other commodity groups to say that really needs to be in there, and I think what came to it was this recognition, as I've said, that the Farm Bill is 2018. And so the reference prices in that were based on a market environment where inputs were 40 to 50% lower than they are today.
Mhm.
Um, in past farm bills, we've kind of gotten away from that or gotten away with that because yields have, sort of overcome that gap. But we haven't seen that since 2018. So, what we're in a situation as where crop prices were, basically where they were or even lower than 2018, input prices are 50% higher. So I think a lot of that sort of carried some additional weight with legislators to say, okay, and give us some time to figure this out. Let's go ahead and add the disaster assistance back in, and it sort of won the day, and rightly so. I mean, it's a situation where I think they were looking at it logically to say, I mean, well, I shouldn't say logically in Washington D.C. is kind of an oxymoron, but they at least looked at it rationally to say there's some justification for this. This isn't really a big pot of money. Let's go ahead and include it and get it on down the road.
Yeah. Well, now that we've got the continuing resolution all squared away and all of those parts attached to it are signed, sealed, and delivered, what's the final breakdown for farmers with these packages? What can they expect?
Well, of course, some of this is going to be how that money gets distributed, right? And the mechanisms by which that gets distributed. There's going to be some internal arguing going on as to what the right mechanism was. And I mean, it's sort of like the MFP payment. They did it one way and then they did it another way. And then, so I think there's some of that that's going to have to be resolved fairly quickly. It at the end of the day, when if you just divide it out by the number of acres, or the number of head of cattle, it's not much money, right? I mean, it's just not going to be a whole lot of money. But I think they're going to have to look at where are the different industries in relative to where they, historically have been, right? I can't, I live in West Texas, so I'll probably get prosecuted for saying this, but I can't imagine a reason why a cattle producer should receive a dime. They're the only industry that's making any money. Cow-calf producers, record high prices, consumption is still hanging in there, all that sort of stuff. But you look at the others, cotton's been in not good shape for several years. Corn and beans, it's a more recent event where, those prices have really, slipped off. So I think if they're going to approach that, they're going to have to allocate that on some form of fashion, sort of historical performance of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years, which one of those industries are in worse shape than others. But that's going to create a lot of fighting, and unfortunately over not a very big pot of money when all's said and done.
Yeah, Darren, that's interesting framing when we're talking about looking at this almost as I don't know, as if we're in competition against other row crops with this thing. I mean, generally on the whole, what is the feeling for how cotton has fared with this program?
Well, I think right now, I don't think cotton is on the short end of that stick, right? I mean, I think there's a recognition that that industry has probably been the weakest over the last several years. So I don't think at the end of the day they're on the short end of that stick, but they're of course, if you listen to the Cotton Council and others, they've got to talk a good talk. The money's in there. They're happy with the performance, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the devil's in the details on this one, and but I think Cotton has, in my mind, Cotton has the strongest position from the standpoint of where revenue versus costs have been, over the last 12 to 24 months, yield, disasters that have happened, total crop losses, all that sort of stuff. So depending on the metric that they use, cotton looks really good in terms of having a claim on a share of that pot. But obviously, we shouldn't kid ourselves. We're 10 and a half to 11 million acres, out of 200 million acres. And so I think at the end of the day, corn and beans are going to suck up a big chunk of that money, and cotton is going to be a residual in it. But as a percentage of their revenue, they may look good. It may be okay for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, insightful, at least for me. So appreciate that. Now, if there is a silver lining, Darren, as we understand it, it appears that USDA is making the registration process for the economic package relatively simple, at least. So can you tell us what's involved, and is there a deadline for signing up?
I'm not aware of if they've set a deadline. I haven't seen it. I haven't looked back in the last few days to see where we're at. But yes, in terms of the silver lining being simple, I think it's going to be a relatively simple process. I think what USDA wants to do is get this money out the door as quickly as they can get it out the door. So they want that. They don't want a long drawn out process that's going to take us into October before producers start getting checks, right? So
You don't want that either.
no, right. So to the benefit of the producer, I think it's going to be very light on the data, kinds of things that they have to submit. And I think that's on purpose, and I think it's a good thing. The deadlines are going to be pretty quick if they're not already set, because I'm not absolutely sure about that one, but they're going to be pretty quick because they want to get it out the door. I know everybody at USDA is just, they also don't want another MFP disaster either. Where it takes too long and there's too many requirements and all that sort of stuff. So I think they just want to get it out as quickly as they can.
Well, Darren, you mentioned the Farm Bill, and I think we're on like our 10th consecutive year. It feels like of discussing and debating this 2018 Farm Bill. It was ceremoniously kicked down the road again. I don't know how many undented pieces of that can are left at this point, but probably rightfully so, considering you've got a new administration. We've got changes coming on leadership at both the House and Senate Ag committees. So what's next? Is there a path to kind of getting this bill done early in the year?
I think there is a path to get it done early. And if you listen to Speaker Johnson, I mean, he wants to get most of these major legislative things done before summer. And the Farm Bill actually, the reality is the Farm Bill is pretty easy in the sense that, Chairman Thompson passed out a bill. It wasn't perfect, but there was updates to reference prices, so a lot of the things that producers were asking for. And the hangup was the Senate. And so, the changeover in the leadership of the Senate, I suspect Chairman Boozman is going to be right in lockstep with Chairman Thompson. And so they should be able to basically committee, ag committee on the House side should be able to kick that thing out fast, pass it over, get a floor vote, pass it over to the Senate. They're going to basically duplicate it and move on. I mean, I think that's the best case scenario. There's not a lot of, I don't think there's a lot of resistance, at least on the GOP side in the Senate, to what Chairman Thompson had, on the table before we, took the break. So if Speaker Johnson is willing to give it floor time, fairly quickly, I think Chairman Thompson's going to move fast to get it out of committee so they can get a floor vote and move on. You never know. It's such a razor thin, majority that if they try to do too much to snap, they're going to lose 215 votes right off the top. And so if you have any defectors on the Republican side, you could run into trouble. So I think they're going to have to be careful in that dance to make sure that they can keep enough Democrats on board with it, with the SNAP provisions to move that thing it should be a very bipartisan bill. There's really nothing controversial on the ag side. The only controversy ever is really on the SNAP supplemental nutrition, food aid programs. So I'm confident they can do it. I think they could do it quick if they'll just spend a little time and get it out of committee.
Okay, because as we all know, at the end of the day, everybody in Washington, just like everybody else, likes to eat.
Yes, yeah, they like to eat, and there's in some of legislatively, as my good friend Mike Conway said, the art of doing a bill, an ag bill, is the only money's in nutrition. It's 85% of the bill. So if you need money for updated reference prices or something like that, it's either got to come from the budget committee, giving you more money, or you've got to take it out of the nutrition program, and that creates a pretty nasty fight.
Yeah.
And some of it is not really even when you get down to it, some of the fight's not even over the dollar, right? The amount that a person is eligible for. It's the eligibility requirements to get into the program in the first place is where a lot of the fight ends up being. So that's really the only, I think, stumbling block. But I think they can get past that.
Okay, good. Well, knowing that, we have turned the page on another new year, which means another new planting season coming up sometime in the next few months. What are you hearing from growers out your way about their planting intentions?
I was going to ask you the same question, Jim. So we just met over the Christmas break at USDA to do the baseline projections, and so there's a good bit of discussion about what's what, and the quote unquote experts in the room, which is the non-USDA people, believe that USDA is too high on their planted acres. I think that's probably right, but the thing is there. It's not like the soybeans or corn are setting out there sucking away acres, right? They're all nasty, and so it becomes, I think, the case of where are you going to potentially lose the least amount of money. And for our growers, that's still primarily cotton. Sorghum's helped a little bit. Corn has buoyed relative to the beans, and so that kind of helps the sorghum a little bit. If it's dry, they'll plant cotton. They won't harvest it. But I think right now most of West Texas is still probably in that last year's kind of range of where we're planting. The Southeast is a little less clear to me. They have more options, but still they're all at this point. One of the people in the room at USDA is like, so what incentive is there to plant anything, right? So, none of them really are above cost of production, at current input prices. So, but yeah, I mean, I still I still think that, 10.3 million acres is doable nationally for planted acres, but it's, last year I would have said, 10.5 with upside potential. Now I would say 10.3 with downside potential on planted acres, and it'll kind of depend on the price action between here and planting time.
Well, Darren, I tell you, as always, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to visit with us, lend your expertise, your perspective to ag, and certainly to cotton's current situation. Like I said, we're 1 week into the new year. There's still an awful lot of uncertainty out at the field level. I think the only thing that's certain right now is things will change between now and the first planter that hits the field. But we'll keep watching and hope for a better year for all of our farmers. And we'll be sure to check in with you again later this year just to see what kind of predictors we actually.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's like I always say, I'm 100% wrong, 100% sure I'm going to be wrong. The question is just by how much. So yeah, no, I look forward to seeing how this unfolds, but I think you're right. Uncertainty about what is going to happen over the next month and a half, 2 months is kind of the rule of the story at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Darren, appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
We thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Beck.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Cotton Companion podcast. We want to thank again Dr. Darren Hudson for joining us in today's discussion. And thanks to Delta Pine for their gracious sponsorship of the podcast, and to Eric Best for participating in this episode's special custom segment. Now, as always, we want to say thank you, dear listener, for joining us and for your continued support. As always, we hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did like what you heard, please be sure and spread the word. Tell your farming friends and neighbors about the Cotton Companion podcast. Here's where and how they could find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion, or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter. And on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
The Cotton Companion podcast is produced twice monthly by Tyler Hatch and Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues at the world headquarters for Maestro Media Worldwide in lovely Willoughby, Ohio. I'm Jim Stedman. He's Beck Barnes, and we'll be back with you in a few weeks after the Beltwide Cotton Conferences with the next episode of the Cotton Companion.
Yeah, he works and he works and he